Hi there. In the previous video, we set up a MySQL database and generated classes needed for the DB core and framework through the DB class schema loader. We also looked at a basic example on how to query data through nodes table ResultSet. So far, we have a good idea what the DB class schema loader module is used for. However, we have not yet looked into more detail what the generated DB files themselves are supposed to do. Let's fix that now and see what these files are actually used for. In general, there are three main classes you should concern yourself with. Specifically, DB class schema, DB class ResultSet, and DB class result. Starting with the DB class schema, this is your bread and butter, so to say, top-level DB class, and you can find it under the schema namespace where we generated all the DB result files, and that's going to live under lib schema myapp. As we saw before, we use this class to create a connection to our database through the connect method here. And behind the scenes, the DB class schema loaded our ResultSet and result classes under our default namespace, which is schema myapp. The key takeaway here really is that we use DB class schema to connect to the database, and we access the ResultSet classes, which are essentially our database tables, through a method called ResultSet, as we can see here. In this case, the node ResultSet allows us to query and produce result instances, which you can see as database rows. Connecting and accessing our database tables through schema class is the core and probably the most used functionality when working with DB framework. However, that of course is not the only thing our schema class can be used for. Let's look up the DBIx schema documentation and see what other things we can use on this instance. So DBIx class schema. We're going to see there's actually quite a lot of methods here. One of these methods is being the ResultSet, which returns an instance that we can use to query the table data. We can use other methods such as sources that lists out all the sources available for our schema. So we can say schema sources, and let's remove that ref keyword, run the script, so Perl, include the lib, and script.pl. We're going to see that we have two sources, which are our user source and node source. We can also start database transactions through the scope guard. We can commit and we can roll back these transactions. We can also access underlying storage, which is going to give us the database handle. There's other high-level things you can do. The interesting methods is deploy. And what deploy allows you to do on the schema, you can use the result classes to create the database tables. So in our approach, what we did, we created SQL database first and we created all the tables. And then we used the schema loader to generate our DB classes. But you can use the vice versa approach where you generate all your schema classes, or you would like to recreate your structure in a new database, and you can call the method deploy. So if we do schema deploy and run that, you're going to see a bunch of debugging lines and exceptions. And these exceptions being that, for example, the table user already exists. This is very handy if you would like to recreate a database from scratch. As you can see, the schema class allows us to do high-level operations on the database and the schema itself. In my experience, there are rare cases where the functionality of the schema class is used outside of accessing ResultSet, aka our tables, to interact with the database. But it's good to know that you have this high-level functionality available if you ever need to, and I encourage you to explore the DB class schema docs in more detail. Now let's explore what are DB class ResultSet classes. By definition, ResultSet is an object which stores a set of conditions representing a query. As I mentioned before, you can view ResultSet as representation of database table having collection of methods that define how the table row should be retrieved or modified. ResultSet classes provide various utility methods that allow you to, for example, paginate results, retrieve result count, delete or update data in bulk, work with related ResultSet classes, and many more. Another great thing about ResultSet classes is that you can define custom ResultSet methods that encapsulate unique query logic. Similar to the count method we called before to get the total number of rows in the nodes table. For example, if we say warn, dumper, and then we just say ResultSet to access the nodes, ResultSet, and we say count, run this. We're going to see that we have 6 nodes. You could have a custom ResultSet method that returns a number of nodes for a specific user, such as you could say node count by user ID, and there you could provide the user ID argument. And what's even cooler is that you can chain multiple ResultSet methods to produce complex SQL conditions. So you could, for example, say by description like, and there you can provide an expression to filter down the description of the node, such as test, and from that you can chain only all the nodes that have specific user ID for, let's say, 2. Looking at these examples, you might have guessed that one of the major benefits of using DBIx result methods to encapsulate queries is that this allows you to reduce repetitive code and reuse the lookup logic encapsulated in ResultSet methods. To note here is that we currently don't see any ResultSet classes in our DBIx file structure. What we do see is the schema my app, and we see the result classes. But we don't have anything that would reference, for example, ResultSet, where we could potentially add our custom methods. This is because, by default, DBIx will construct these ResultSet classes internally based on our result classes and add all the default methods, such as the count methods and others. In the next videos, we will create custom ResultSet classes under this folder I just created for the time being, which is empty. And we'll also extend these custom ResultSet classes with our own methods. And to note, to access the documentation, you can go to DBIx class schema ResultSet, where you can explore all the methods available on your result sets. Again, there's quite a lot of methods, and we will discuss many of them in more detail. But for the time being, I encourage you to go to the documentation and explore these in more detail on your own. Now let's move to the final item in the DBIx chain, which is the result class. And these can be found under schema, my app result, and our note result, and our user result. When we call methods that invoke query built by the ResultSet instance, such as the first method we saw in the previous video, so that was the schema, ResultSet note, and we call the first method, we are getting back an instance of an object that represents the source data that we are querying for. So if I save this and add the ref keyword before and run the script, we're going to see that what we're getting back is an instance of schema, my app, result note, which is exactly the same what we have here generated by DBIx, schema loader. So these returned instances of our source data are our result classes we created using the DBIx schema class loader that represent the database row structure and implements methods from the DBIx class row. Just a quick note here, if you would go to DBIx class result and try to look for documentation under that, you wouldn't find anything. What you need to look for is DBIx class row. So that's just a quick note, and you need to remember that our result classes inherit all the methods from DBIx class row. Similar to how DBIx class ResultSet can be seen as representation of a database table that encapsulates methods to query or modify data in source table, the DBIx class result can be seen as a table row with methods to modify the underlying data. As you can see, there are various methods available on our row. Some of the significant being such as update, so we can update the row that we received, or we can delete a row. We can of course also construct a new row and insert it, and other interesting methods, for example, where we can say either update the row if it exists, or you insert it based on unique columns, or insert or update based on scenario that you're working with. Now again, quite a lot of methods, same as with ResultSet, and we will explore these in more detail. Now just quickly recap, there's three main things. These are the DBIx class schema, which we can see here, that we use for connecting to our database. There are DBIx class result sets, as we see here, that we can use to query the data on the table. And finally in the chain we have DBIx class result, and those are our database rows that we retrieve from ResultSet. Now that's it for this video. We had a high overview of what are the schema, ResultSet and result classes and how they all come together in the DBIx framework ecosystem. It's time to get to the good stuff, and let's see how we can query the data in multiple ways in the next video.